Hi, this is Andrew Holster from Atassa Research. This is an interview with Murray Hutchings about possum control methods comparing expert trapping with poison bait stations. Murray recorded primary footage of working a trap line in the Aramahoe Ecological Reserve in the Waimarino Forest in the central North Island of New Zealand. This is a reserve that is heavily controlled by bait station poisoning. The primary footage is posted separately on the Atassa YouTube channel, and you can see the link below. I recommend viewing the primary footage first.
There's still huge numbers of possums, and people don't realise and don't read sign. They see a couple of dead possums around a bait station and they think, wow, that's good, it's killed a couple of bait station possums. But, you know, a lot of the time I can trap 20 possums in these areas out of one trap, especially in the summer when the weather's settled. And people just do not realise the numbers of possums in these areas. And it's becoming not just here, it's a lot of areas, a lot of farms I work, the boundaries where they've got bait stations run by regional council contractors, which is costing the ratepayers a lot of money, and they're basically having very little effect. You know, they kill a few possums, as I say, and you see a few dead possums around a bait station and think, wow, I come in behind them. And one farm I work, you know, I just trapped them last summer behind them on not a big area and took 900 possums just off the bushage behind them without going in and working the bush, just where I could ride my motorbike, which is pretty poor as far as the results of their pest control work go. And when you tell them, they don't believe you. So I took some videos just to prove what I'm doing.
Okay, so just to summarize a little bit before we get into the detail, Murray recorded results of trapping possums in a protected ecological reserve of about 1,200 hectares with over 500 active poison bait stations, and Murray trapped only a fraction of the area as shown on the map. And Murray's results show that the area is infested with possums despite being recently poisoned, and he has observed the same phenomena multiple times before. In the first part of the experiment, he works a line of 70 traps for 5 days following a poison bait station line that was poisoned 2 weeks before he started the trapping. This is in a highly protected ecological reserve where the conservation authorities have maintained an intensive possum control regime for years. Now also I just note here that it is the number of days that you can keep catching possums from one trap that is the real measure of possum numbers in an area. And Murray had intended to trap for 10 days, but he had to stop for a health issue after the first 5 days. But following this interview, about a month later, he continued trapping for another 5 days to make the full 10 days. And this is the second part of the experiment. The same high catch rate continued. Murray's footage of this will be posted in a separate video, and the results from the full trapping exercise are summarized in a table at the end of this video. In the first part of the experiment, Murray caught 255 mature possums from 70 traps in the first 5 days without moving a trap, and the catch rate was over 80% per trap with no sign of reduction in numbers. And the results demonstrate unequivocally that the area around the recently poisoned bait stations is highly infested with possums, and it can be inferred that the entire ecological reserve is highly infested with possums, despite years of intensive poisoning by the conservation authorities.
I believe the possums have adapted to sticking their heads in bait stations over the years because they've, they're poorly operated. They're put on GPS readings, not on possum runs. I only trap where there's possum runs. And possums use possum runs. That's what they're there. They're like our roads. We use roads. They run the same place. They wear the ground down. And theoretically, this area should not have possum runs because it's had so much pest control work on it. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of bait stations and poison been in this whole area, and yet there's still huge numbers of possums, and we need to start changing our methods and not just sticking out bait stations on a GPS reading and leaving them there for 10 or 15 years. And, the possums drop pellets on the ground when they feed out of them, and then the weather gets on them, and then they become sublethal. And once an animal gets a sublethal dose of a poison, it will not touch it again, ever. And it actually teaches its young ones not to as well. People don't realise how smart animals are, but pigs, when you were poisoning possums, used to eat all your dead carcasses because cyanide is not a secondary poison. And as soon as they brought in 1080 and poisoned areas, and it killed a lot of pigs with the secondary poison from eating possum bodies. Pigs will not eat possums for 10 years after one 1080 drop. That's how quickly animals learn. And possums are the same. And I believe the possums are adapting quicker than what the pest control guys are, because they keep doing the same thing year in, year out and think it's working. It worked originally, but now the animals are used to it and it's not working. And they don't realise. I just had a forestry boss telling me another area that a guy has just poisoned. He said, we won't do the bait stations next year. There's not many possums there. And I rode around it on my bike having a look, and there's a few dead possums here and there, but I'm looking at these bait stations and thinking, look at the runs coming out, 5 metres, 10 metres from the bait station. There's heavy runs. There's a lot of possums there. But they look at the bait station and think, we're not killing many possums. There's not many possums here. They've got no idea about reading possum sign. When you see a heavy run on the ground, it's a lot of possums using it. But he doesn't look at that and think, we should move the bait station. They look at it and say, we won't do it next year because we're not getting many possums. There's not many left. And it's mind-boggling. They just have no idea. And it's not just here. It's everywhere, right throughout New Zealand.
Yeah.
We're just wasting money and educating animals, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, so with your video, I think it's very convincingly shows that you're working behind bait stations that have just been filled up a couple of weeks before.
Yeah, 3 weeks or so before, yeah.
And yet you're catching, overall, over 80% of your traps are full.
Not for just one night, though, over 5 days.
Nights,
yeah.
And they're continuing to be full.
If you trap for one night, you can trap 80%, and then if it drops off quickly, you've got, but if it keeps trapping for 5 nights, that means there's huge numbers of possums there.
So to me it looks like it's infested with possums.
It is infested with possums.
And yet they've just done they've got like intensive bait stations all through the...
Oh, look, they have intensive. And I only did a little bit of it,
And so you think the reasons are, first of all, they just put out the bait stations by GPS that's pre-assigned and not looking for trees.
They're not looking for runs and sign, basically.
And they don't know how to look for
They don't understand it. And when they first put out bait stations and when they put out these bait stations, they use huge amounts of lure. You can smell a bait station, you know, 50 metres away, 30 metres away, and we can't smell anything like a possum. So the
Yeah.
possums smell them and they come to them. But then when they see their mates dying around them year after year, they think, we're not going to them. Or when they get a sublethal dose, they that's it. They don't go. And it's, if
Yeah.
you've got a bait station facing towards the rain and the rain goes in there, these guys don't go around and clean these bait stations out and scrub out the the sediment out of the bottom of them. They say they do, but they don't. And it's just a poor operation, and it's easy. It was easy. It was quick. Trapping is an intensive job. But then again, there's a lot of fine points in trapping. There's not many people can trap and get 89% kills night after night. It's comes from a lot of experiment and learning and changing and trying different methods until you actually get it exactly right. And there's very few. You look up YouTube on catching possums, you see all these guys sticking traps in a bit of a tube from a downpipe to have it off the ground, or they put them on the ground and they're doing it. And it's ridiculous. You catch very few possums doing that. You use
Yeah.
you use runners set up, which is a natural feed for a possum to run up, and you look for the sign. You've got to put them on their things, and it's a trade. It's not a 5 minute job. You give somebody, here, boy, go and fill up bait stations. They're all on a GPS reading. All you got to do is put some bait in them, and away you go.
Well, that's exactly what they are doing, isn't it?
It is exactly
So
what they're doing.
any knowledge of the bush or the ecology or the possum lifestyle is of no use to them because they're just racing around
Oh,
putting.
one contractor will set up a line and he might work it for a year or two and then he might disappear. Another contractor comes along, he's never been there, but he's got all of those GPS tags, so they know exactly where they, and they just fill them up. And they say, oh, we're not allowed to move a bait station, but there's heaps of these bait stations that have fallen off the trees or rotted off. They don't even pick them up and put them back. There's so much plastic, hundreds of tons of plastic of bait stations. I've got photos. There's a bait station lying on the ground there, and there's another one there. They don't bother picking up that one, and over the years, there's so many bait station lines just left on trees that get brittle and fall off, and the rats chew them, and the rocks thing. There's more plastic being dropped in our bush from DOC and regional council and animal health board guys that are meant to be looking after the environment than we ever had from supermarket shopping bags. But people don't crawl around in these dirty gullies and up and down to see all this, but I do, and it's incredible. There's literally hundreds of thousands of base stations left lying in our bush that have fallen off trees, or that they've been there that long, the tree grows out and pops them off the nail, they fall off, or the tree dies because they put them on a sapling and it rots and the bait station falls off. Nobody goes around and collects those bait stations and picks them all up and takes them out. They just put another line out and another line out, and it's ridiculous. It is
Hey,
just...
but I thought it was against the law to leave plastic lying around in the bush.
Well, not
Which
if
is
you're a
supposed
dock,
to take
not if you're a dock worker or a regional council contractor. You can do whatever you want, but you can make rules for other people. But no, this bait station thing has just got out of control, and people actually think because there's a bait station and there's poison in it, it's doing well. They're doing a great job, but it's, as I say, the animals are... You look at the video and you'll see how many animals are still there after a poison, and it's had years and years and
Yeah.
hundreds of bait stations in that area and aerial 1080. It shouldn't have hardly any animals in it, but they're
So
out of control.
they've been using the bait station method for what, 30 years?
Yep,
20, 30
they have.
years? And so the bait station plastic just keeps building up, and they're quite big too, aren't they? I
Yeah,
mean, they're
yeah, and
quite
heavy,
chunky
heavy
things.
plastic.
Yeah.
Well, they make them out of heavy plastic. They used to make them out of thinner plastic, but all the rats and the possums chew through the top of them and let the water in. So they made them out of heavier plastic to stop that. They still chew holes in them, but no, the amount of plastic but I mean, it's fine if you use them, but
Mm. If they were catching
you
possums.
take them away when you're finished and you clean them up and you reuse them more. But they don't. They
Yeah.
don't. Um,
Well, what about monitoring? What do they do for monitoring their catch or monitoring the possums in the area? Because if they're seems to me like they're living in fantasy land here because they're putting out bait stations saying that we've poisoned it so there's no possums, but and yet it's infested. So how do they monitor the results of their?
well, I don't know about that area whether it ever gets monitored, but a lot of the farm areas get monitored. But they're doing the same stuff. They're putting out traps on a GPS line that they draw a line in the office. You go and put out so many traps down there, and you record your kills over a 3 night, 5 night period, and you put out so many traps on that GPS line. Well, for a start, if you're trapping possums, you've got to look for their feed trees, right? If they're in the native, in the tawa bush when the berries are ripe, they're eating tawa berries. But possums like the fringes. They like the grass. They like eating the whitey woods around the fringes. So you go where the possums are. You look for sign. I might be trapping a crop around a farm, right? And I've had guys with me, and there's a big kike there, and I might put a trap on one big kike, and I get to the next big kike, and I'm having a look, and he says, "Why haven't you put a trap there?" And I say, "Because there's been no crop eaten here, so there's no possum living here."
Yeah.
Oh, oh. I said, "I didn't put a trap where there's no sign of a possum living. I'm looking for sign. I'm looking where he's coming out of the bush and eating that crop. If I'm in the bush, I'm going down around the fringes looking where they're coming out. I put a trap. I don't put a trap on a GPS reading if there's long grass and no sign of a possum. You're wasting your time." And in the pines, they love the pine buds when the pines are budding, and they come for them. And so you look for where they're coming to those pines, and you put traps there, and you will catch multiple amounts of possums. But you can have a trap 10 metres away, not on a run, and you will never catch a possum. No, not one. And I can get 20 here and none there. And they can see it. They can see the lure on it. People talk about lures. We've got a new lure. Lures mean very little. It's having your trap in the right place where the possums are moving. And often possums, after a lot of poisoning, they become very shy to lures. And that's what happens with monitoring. They come in, they monitor after a poison operation where the possums the ones that are left are very cagey. They've either had a sublethal dose. So that any foreign looking lure, they go well away from it. I've learnt that if you're trapping after poison operations where the possums are shy, you don't use a visible lure. And because they are aware, whoops, that doesn't look normal, we're going somewhere else. You've got to be adaptable, and you've got to think, and you've got to be able to read sign. If you put a trap on a run and it's not catching a possum, you've got to start thinking why it's not. Is the possum shy? Is the possum trap shy? Is it bait shy? And you've got to change it till you catch them. If you're not looking at the sign and reading the sign, you're not doing your job. And basically, that's what's happening now with all these cheap labour units they're using. They get all these young fellas, come and work for me, I'll pay you so much a bait station. All you've got to do is read a GPS. Well, while you're walking around looking at a GPS, you're not looking at sign in the bush for a start. But it's just the way it's become.
Mm.
And now it's, like I say, it's been going too long. The possums have got used to it. And the possums have adapted quicker than the humans, which is a sad thing to say, but it's true.
So just another thing I was wanting to ask you was you observe a few possums around the bait stations that you go past,
Yeah.
right? But not very many. So did you try to
Oh,
count the
oh,
ones that were there, or
what's that?
did you try to count the possums at the
Oh
bait
no, when they
stations?
first put those bait stations out,
Mm,
not that line, but just that's only a little part of that line that I am trapping.
yeah,
There was over 500 bait stations they filled. I drove around every day for the first 4 nights and picked up 150 possums out of over 500 bait stations
150.
over 4 nights. And then it's dropped right off. And then most of the bait stations are empty, but there's still some that possums aren't ever going to go to. And the odd rat. There shouldn't be rats in there because there's heaps of predator traps, but there are rats in there because I catch them too.
Yeah,
I don't tally my rats, but I did catch rats most nights, especially wet nights. I catch a rat, and
but you think that you found 150
yep,
out of 500 bait
yep,
stations over 2 weeks.
over 4 nights
So you already caught twice as much as that
out of
in the
and
same time
out of 70 traps,
out of
or not
70 traps.
70, and then 70 for 3 nights and 90 for 2 nights. So yeah, I caught three, and that's afterwards, not before.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Do the contractors, do they record, go back
No, they
over the
don't go.
bait? They
They
don't
don't go
record
back.
the number of kills?
No, they don't go back.
How do they have any idea how effective it is? Just,
Oh, because you can drive around. All their bait stations are off the roads. They're not.
yeah, yeah,
They drive around and they see a few dead possums. They think, "Wow, we've done well." Nobody counts. Everybody sees a few dead possums and think. I had one of the contractors, one of the roading contractors in the forest, say to me a few years ago, "Oh, those bait stations have worked well. There's one or two dead possums along every bait station along the road." And I said, "Do you think that's worked well?" He said, "Yeah, yes, cool." And I came in behind and caught over 10 possums per trap behind them. But
yeah,
I don't leave my possums lying on the road for them to see, so they don't know. But if you see a dead possum by a bait station, you think, wow, that's done well. People do not realise how many possums there are. And it's easy to see. You can see by how heavy the sign is on the ground, how much poo's around the pine tree. Um, and that's and if I trap in the summer and a possum has a summer joey, it means it's made it twice for the year, and it means the numbers are not extremely high. But if I trap and a possum doesn't have a summer joey, I know the numbers are high because it hasn't had the feed to get in condition to get pregnant for a second joey, and they're just those signs you know straight away. Whoops, these have all got a summer joey. I'm only going to catch for 3 or 4 nights, and then if they haven't got a summer joey, I think, ooh, I'm going to make some money here because I'm going to trap for maybe 10, 20 nights.
yeah. And when with your possums, you process them for fur and for pet food.
Well, I can't with a poisoning with pet food. Um, well, I can with ferrotox actually, but yeah, I've always skinned the best, plucked the rest, and taken the bodies for pet food. But there's so much poison now, and some of these poisons that they're using are a 3 year withholding period before you can actually take pet food. So you've got to be very. They might have ferrotox in the bait station this year, but they might have had one of these other poisons the year before, which takes a 3 year withholding period. So I don't risk taking carcasses where there are bait stations, basically.
Yeah. And what do the contractors do with their possum? What happens to their possums?
They just, the hawks and the pigs get them.
Yeah,
The hawks do well out of them, yeah.
they just rot where they lie,
Well, the
and
hawks come and clean up a lot of them. The
yeah,
hawks, the hawks are pretty good on it. And that's fine when you're using a ferrotox.
yeah,
But when you're using a secondary poison, it hammers the hawks. They're like, there's a whole lot of drunk hawks after they've eaten these possums, and then they take off and they crash, and they take off and they crash, and they take off and they crash, and then eventually die. And so that's what happens to the hawks. Mm.
And people are concerned about secondary poisoning of several different species.
Oh, well, in the forests, especially these forests that are joint ventures owned, the pig hunters are very, very anti secondary poisons because it kills their dogs pretty rapidly. So, yeah, they're pretty anti them. They kick a lot of the bait stations off the trees and all sorts of things. The old pig hunters, they don't like it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So basically, the picture I've got is that there's tons and tons of poison, different poisons spread around in the forest on tons and tons of plastic bait stations. They're capturing bugger all possums. They're
Yep.
actually very ineffective. It's been going for several decades without any change, and no one's.
Oh, honestly, when it first started, it was working reasonably well.
Yeah,
It
and
was.
the possums weren't so poison shy,
No,
huh?
no. But you just can't keep doing the same thing for 20 years, leaving a bait station in the same place. It gets all overgrown. You can see on the video I've shown you some of the bait stations that are totally overgrown, and they go and fill them up because their powers that be say, no, you're not allowed to move the bait station because then the next contractor won't be able to find it. You know, it's all GPS. It is, it is run by people in offices who have some sort of idea that was made up from the Forest Research Institute 40, 50 years ago. And a lot of those ideas were totally wrong. And it's the same with the possum movements, like we did in the video on, like I said, the possums aren't
Yes.
moving from Tamarunui down to Taihape
Yeah.
because they're two totally different breeds and they haven't changed in the last
Yeah.
60 years. But you can't tell the Animal Health Board that. They think they are.
Well, do you think, in the upper level management of these organisations, like the regional councils and the Animal Health Board and DOC, I guess, are the three of the main ones. Do you think that they've got any hands-on experience trapping possums, catching possums?
Well, a mate of mine that used to be the dock manager here was telling me the other day that these dock people were telling him that they had this amazing girl who was a trapper. She caught 1,000 possums for the year. And they thought that was amazing. And if I don't catch 1,000 possums for the month, I'm pretty disappointed. So yeah, they don't have much knowledge. And
1,000 a year. Well, that's only 3 possums a day
yeah,
if you
yeah.
trapped every day.
No, because you don't work 7 days a
No,
week when you
no,
work
I
on
know,
dock. And
but
so on a Friday you have to set your traps off because it's illegal to leave your possum. So you
sure.
miss Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and then if it's raining, you're still. So if you're trapping for yourself, you trap every fine night that you can. You don't have weekends. You don't have public holidays. You don't have any of that stuff because if you did, you wouldn't catch enough possums to make a living. Mm.
Yeah, but you've been targeting 1,000 a month since
That's
you've.
my tally. Yeah.
But that's
Um,
kind of since you're retired, huh? You used
no,
to
no,
do it,
no,
no?
no. I'm
You always.
I'm kicking back now. I'm
Yeah,
kicking
yeah.
back now. But for years, if you're not catching 1,000 possums a month, you might as well have a job somewhere else. In the days when the skin prices crashed and the forestry paid me to catch possums, that was the deal. I had to take 1,000 tails a month for them.
Mm.
And that's some months I can catch 2,000 possums in February, January when the weather's fine and the possums are running well. And some months and it's wet and horrible, you only get 500. But you try and I've always tried to average that. I've taken 10 to 12,000 possums a year most years for a long time.
Do you think there's more possums or less now?
A lot more possums
A lot more
now.
possums, so.
There's heaps more possums now than when the skin prices were at their peak. But then when 1080 first came in and they did a lot of big aerial drops, they knocked the possum numbers back. But now, as I say, the possums have adapted and the pestboards haven't, and the possums are exploding. They are exploding. It's mind-boggling. I used to run, 200 to 300 traps and catch the same amount of possums as what I'm catching with 100 traps now. And all right, I've refined my ways a lot. I've learned a lot more, and I'm more productive with how I do it. But there's still a lot more possums around now than there was 30 years ago. A lot
Yeah.
more.
So they should be catching swags of them.
They should be. They should be poisoning a lot of them. But
Maybe you should be taking some of the executives from these organisations out possum
they
trapping
don't. They don't
for
want
a
to
week
know.
and show them what it's actually
They've got
happening.
advisors, and they don't know, and they don't want to know. Their job's sitting on a chair like this, and you know they don't want to be out getting wet and muddy and covered in bloody possum fur and shit. But yeah, it's sad. It's sad because here we are. We've got this predator free. That's another big money sponge that people are getting hold of and sucking, and we're getting further and further and further away from predator free. And people honestly think if you've got a trap out and you're not catching anything, you've got no predators. Or if you've got a bait station and you're not poisoning anything, you've got no predators. I've proved it time after time going into farms behind these guys that have got all these kill traps set up that have killed all these possums, and you come in and you take hundreds of possums out behind them, and they go, "Wow, we thought we'd killed all the possums." Yeah, that's only because they're not sticking their head in your kill trap anymore.
Yeah. And when you do take out the majority of possums, does it become obvious to you that they're gone?
Well, you don't do it overnight,
No.
but over a period of a few years working the same country, you drop the numbers consistently, really, to where it gets totally uneconomic for me.
Okay. So with an area like this reserve,
Oh, yeah,
how long would it take you to trap that out and get it down to what do you think?
no, well, that reserve is.
Oh,
Oh, look, I used to trap this forest every year round, and each year it got harder and harder and less possum. But I'm only getting paid for what I catch, so
yeah.
I have to be catching 10 possums an hour to make myself. Otherwise, I'm buying
Yeah.
four
Yeah.
wheelers and
Yeah.
trucks and running fuel. Otherwise, even at 10 possums an hour in this day and age, I'm better off working for somebody else. I'd be better off working for Doc, going in and having a cup of coffee, leaving the office at 8 and driving out in a dog truck, getting out in the forest by 10 and wandering around having a look at a few traps and bait stations that, oh
Mm.
yeah, there's nothing in them. We've done well. We've done well. There's no pests here. And yeah, it's a pretty comfortable lifestyle, but I I have this thing in my head. I chase tallies. I love to try and beat these possums. I especially like to beat them after they've done these big money spends on some of these blocks, and you go in behind them, and you can. Mind-boggling. A lot of the time, the possums are very shy. You've got to feed them, but it's mind-boggling on what's left behind.
Yeah. Well, I think that the conservation groups should be really concerned about this because it means we've got these bureaucracies that have been given, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on controlling pests, and even in the Kiwi Reserve, after years, the problem's getting worse. It's just not working.
No, it's not.
Um, and the
Look, it's just one possum trapper putting up a few videos of trapping them behind these guys. They make up excuses, They say, "Oh, how's to prove that's where you were? Has he GPS the spot and put it on a map? Has he done this? Has he done that? Look, they just look for ways to cover their butt and make excuses. I hit up the contractor who was doing this about how slack they were because they weren't picking up the bait stations that were on the ground and filling up the ones they had to get up the bank. And he said, I've seen your trap lines with dead possums in them that you've forgotten. And I said, where? On Tanapara Station. I said, no, you haven't. I said, you might see the odd trap that I've missed with a dead possum in it, but very few. Not whole trap lines. Yes, I have. Well, that's just straight out lie because I don't, and I can't afford to. I use American traps. I don't use cheap Chinese traps. You can't buy American traps anymore. So if I left whole trap lines in the bush, I'd run out of traps pretty quickly. I'd be out of business within a short time. But
So, do
anyway,
you think the contractors resent you doing trapping in there, or
no, they
you?
just resent you showing up how useless they are.
Yeah, right.
They
Yeah.
don't like it, and I shouldn't really because if they were made to be accountable and do a better job, it'd make it a lot harder for me.
Mm.
It's pretty easy following these guys that the whole thing's slick. But at this stage of my life, I'm not going to do them much longer. So I've decided it's time that people should realise that their money is being wasted.
Yeah, and it's all across New Zealand, huh?
It's everywhere. It's
The
everywhere.
same, the same, the same trap. They use the same poisoning
Oh,
methods.
no, no, no. Like the East Coast, up around the East Coast, Gisborne, up the East Coast, they're not doing any poisoning with bait stations basically because they have no TB.
Oh yeah.
And TB brought in these bait stations with the Animal Health Board trying to save the spread of possums, which is just another farce, which we've spent billions on. And but the possums over there are big dark possums, and so they've always been valuable possums. So it's always had a reasonably good number of very good trappers working that area. Has forever. So the possum numbers are pretty low. Um, the possum numbers where I work over around Matawai and up the east coast, where I've worked for the last 6 or 7 years, just to chase those big possums for the skins and the big bodies, the possum numbers are heaps lower than they are here, where they're spending all this money on poison stations. I will only catch for a max of 3 nights up around the Uwera's East Coast there. The numbers are low, but and it's not the pest board that's done it; it's private trappers, and they've kept it like that because they've always been worth money. It's like the deer, when the deer were worth money, we had low numbers of deer. As soon as the venison prices disappeared, the deer exploded. Um,
Yeah.
so, and here these are little grey possums, so there's not a lot of guys. There's half the money in a possum around here as there is on a possum on the east coast. Half the money.
But you can still make a good living from catching possums.
Well, you can if you go do your numbers here.
But it's hard work, obviously. But
Yeah,
you
it's
have to be
consistent.
you have to be if you're a good trapper and you're
Yeah. You
dedicated,
have
you
to
can
know
make
what you're doing, and you have to be consistent.
you
And
can make a good
um,
income.
but yeah, the old body's not handling it like it used to anymore. So I got to start listening to the body, and so that's why I decided. Well, I used to laugh and think, oh, it's easy following these guys around. I'll keep my mouth shut and just. But now I've decided that um, look, it's just ridiculous, and it needs to be shown and pointed out. So there needs to be change,
Mm.
um, but change is very hard when people build empires doing what they're doing and making money for no accountable results.
Yes.
Mm.
Well, so I'll just conclude with a quick summary of key points. Now, Murray is highly critical of the pest control methods used by the conservation authorities because they've ceased to be effective. And his observation, drawn from years of experience, is that poisoning methods were initially very effective for possum control when they were first introduced several decades ago, but after decades of using rudimentary poisoning methods without change or refinement and without meaningful monitoring, they have now ceased to be effective. Murray explained several reasons for this failure. Poor poisoning technique is one reason, but the primary reason is that possums have adapted and learned and been educated to avoid poison baits over the years. The conservation authorities have not adapted or learnt and continue to use the same ineffective methods for decades. Murray also explains why the authorities have failed to notice this systemic failure. The standard monitoring process used to estimate possum numbers after poisoning or pest control efforts is highly flawed and gives meaningless results. Monitors appear to show reduced possum numbers in areas after poisoning, even though they actually remain highly infested with possums.